Hello everyone, I'm Will Terrell. Welcome to this video. Today I'm doing a quick sketch of a little old man walking his dog at the park. I've had this gag stuck in my head for a few days, so I thought I'd finally sit down and sketch it out. I also wanted to do a video today talking about dealing with stress as an artist, since I've just completed my first issue of my new comic book series. I thought I'd share some of the lessons I've learned over the years on how to deal with stress and deadlines and all the pressures that come along with needing to get stuff done while you're living your life. I guess the first thing I should say is that stress is a relative term. My level of stress that I handle on a regular basis these days is something that would have crushed my soul 15 years ago. I remember in high school freaking out over just trying to get a paper done or finish up a project in time and crumbling under the pressure. I'll be honest, I wasn't always very good at handling stress. In fact, I was pretty bad at it when I was younger, or even up to 5 or 6 years ago. I wasn't very good at handling deadlines, and part of that was I just constantly overthought what it was I was doing, and I was overthinking my how things needed to be perfect, and how other people were going to perceive my work, and I would just get sidetracked. I would psych myself out before I even got started on a project. It got so bad for me dealing with stress that I got to a point where I would do anything I could to avoid stress in stressful situations, meaning I would avoid deadlines, and I would avoid putting myself out there for projects and for opportunities, which is the worst thing you can do. Because I'll be honest, it is impossible to avoid stress. I mean, there are ways to avoid commitment, but all that does, it leaves you to depression, and it leads you to being stagnant, not improving in your life, and being stuck in the same place, and being limited by your own opportunities, and that's a miserable experience. So my first tip for learning to deal with stress is to accept the fact that it's not going to be perfect. Whatever you do is not going to be perfect. In fact, the biggest rookie mistake you can make is thinking that you're going to do a perfect job your first time out. I mean, it's taken me, I've probably drawn 50 comic books in my career, and the last 2 books that I've done are probably my favorite work. And it took that long to actually do work that I'm proud of. And this is under extreme deadline pressure. The works that I had time, where I'd spend 6 months on, one issue, and it still didn't turn out the way I wanted to. Where these I'm having to do, at least a page a day, sometimes 2 or 3 pages a day. They're turning out better than any of the work I did before. And part of that is I don't have time to think about it anymore. I'm going off of instincts, where when I have time to think, that just makes things worse because I overanalyze everything. So the first tip that I have is to accept the fact that you're not going to get it right the first time out. In fact, you're not going to get it right the first 30 or 40 times out. And so you have to accept that and move on. In fact, the best advice I ever got on this was from David Hedgecock, who he gave me my first professional job in the comics industry as the colorist on Gargoyles for Disney and slave labor graphics. And he would draw a panel that was, I wouldn't let it go to print because I was just overthinking everything. And he's like, whatever, I'll get it right on the next issue. And that was his philosophy. Like, you do the best you can on the page that's in front of you. And it may not be the perfect page, but you do as good as you can in the amount of time that you have. And I've really, once I finally got it into my head that that's the way to work, I've lived by that philosophy. Like, I have one day to get this page perfect. And if I'm not happy with it, then I'll work on the next page and try and fix the mistakes on the next page. And so on until the book is finished. And then I sit down and I look at the whole book, and I show it to other people, other artists, and I get critiques on it. And I take notes on what I did wrong and how I can improve on it. And then when I go to work on the next issue or the next book that I work on, I fix those mistakes. And it's the same thing with doing sketches in my sketchbook. I do the best I can on a sketch as I'm working on it, and then I put it away and move on to the next sketch and then the next one until I fill up the entire book. And then I look at the whole thing and see what I could do to improve on it, and then get feedback from friends, from other artists, and then apply that to the next work that I do. And that's why when I look at other artists' stuff to give critiques on their work, I never give a critique on just one sketch. You can't do that, because the one sketch that they show you is going to be the one that they spent hours and hours on, and I'm not going to learn anything from that. You have to look at the body of work of an artist, over a certain period of time in order to see how it is that they've improved. I also think that's the mistake that a lot of artists make, is they look at the finished work of people that they admire, and they don't look at all the dozens and dozens of terrible drawings in their sketchbook that they did in order to get to that finished sketch. You shouldn't compare your messy, unfinished work to somebody else's finished work, because they're only showing their best. You're not seeing all the steps that it took them to get there. So my next tip for dealing with stress and deadlines is, it's kind of complicated, but basically is to know where you're going. I think that a lot of people think that this deadline or this thing that's right in front of them is so big and scary that it intimidates them, and it keeps them from even attempting it, or the fear of failure that if you don't do this right, that it's going to screw you up for the rest of your life, or all kinds of crazy thoughts like that. The thing is, you have to have a clear vision of who you want to be, 5 or 10 years from now, or 20 years from now. And the reason for that is you have to know where you're going. I mean, think about if you were wanting to go to Chicago or to California, you would look on a map and you figure out what route you need to take to get there, and how long it'll take you to get there, and all the things that'll come up along the way. And knowing exactly where you want to be, 15 or 20 years from now. In my case, I want to be a great storyteller. And there are lots of ways to get to that path. One is by telling stories with comic books. One is by being a storyboard artist. One is by writing scripts. One is by just telling stories in everyday life. And having a clear vision of who I'm going to be down the road allows me to not only get through stressful situations and realize I can do my best on this, and if it's not perfect, it's okay, because it's building towards this long-term goal. And I can make mistakes, and that too is okay, because I'll get it right the next time around. And also, knowing where you're going to go, where you want to go down the road, allows you to say no to certain opportunities. Stuff that seems like a really good, perfect opportunity for somebody may not help you get to where you want to be down the road. And so it's okay to say no to those opportunities, which a lot of stress comes from saying yes to things that you don't feel comfortable doing, or that are things that you feel like you shouldn't be doing. And knowing exactly where it is that you need to go, like if somebody says, hey, can you drop me off in New York City on your way to California, you can say no, because that's like on the other side of the country. It doesn't help me get me to where I want to be. It's that kind of scenario. So if you want to be, a storyboard artist, you wouldn't start taking work as a sculpturist. You get the idea. So basically, having a clear vision of who you want to be and who you're becoming, I can't emphasize this enough, how important that is. Like, it helps you get through so many situations where before it seemed like there was a big boulder in your way. All of a sudden it seems like a little tiny pebble, because you're like, nope, I'm on my way to something very, very big, and this is nothing. I can deal with this like no problem whatsoever. It also helps you handle all the little details of learning how to draw, and doing bad drawings. All of a sudden it doesn't matter, because you are becoming this other person, 15 or 20 years from now, and that person knows how to draw all these things that you're frustrated with now, but that person doesn't exist until you learn how to do it. You, right now, are that person's success story. Like, you may feel like you've got a lot to learn right now, and it's true. But that person 15, 20 years from now is going to look back on you and say, man, I'm so glad that I sat down and did the hard work and I made those sacrifices, because I would not be here now. You are that success story. Today is that success story. And having that mindset allows you to deal with stress so much better, because it's so rare in our life to have those magical moments, those magical opportunities to do the impossible thing. Like, that's what's gotten me through so many of my deadlines in the last few years, where I'll be on a project that nobody thinks I can get done on time, and other artists have failed. They haven't been able to live up to those expectations, and somehow I make it happen. Having that mindset makes deadlines into a joyful thing instead of a stressful, painful experience. It becomes something that you are proud of and you are excited about. And your clients come to appreciate that, the people that hire you. And by appreciating that, they pay you more. And that leads to more clients, that leads to more projects and more opportunities. In the beginning of this video, I talked about stress and how it's sort of a relative thing. And it's very, very true. Like, I couldn't even imagine handling the type of stress I handle now when I was younger. I just didn't have the skills at all to deal with it. And you have to keep that in mind with whatever it is that you're dealing with. Like, think of it, it was explained to me by a friend of mine a long time ago that if you imagine yourself in a little bubble, and this little bubble is your bubble of happiness, of contentment, and this is what you're comfortable with doing. You're comfortable with, your normal average day. And suddenly stress comes in and it starts pushing in on your bubble. And most people just want to run away from it. They want to go in the opposite direction. But the problem is, stress is going to find you wherever you go, and it's going to try and push into your life. And the truth is, it's a good thing. Because when you turn and you face stress and you face your deadlines and you face these things that you're afraid of, all of a sudden that bubble expands. Like, you're able to handle that piece of stress that was trying to force its way into you. And now all of a sudden your bubble is bigger because you've taken on this little tiny other bubble. And this happens over and over until your bubble is so big that you were able to handle things that you couldn't even imagine doing when you first started. I remember a few years ago, I was talking to my mentor, one of my mentors who sadly passed away. I was talking to him about handling stress and how I was sort of frustrated waiting on a client to pay me for a project that I'd done, and I didn't know how I was going to pay for a certain bill. And I was hoping, I was thinking someday it'll be nice to be, successful and wealthy, and that way I won't have to worry about these things. And he smiled and he laughed because he was a multi-millionaire. He was a very, very successful businessman. And he was laughing because he said the stress doesn't ever go away. It just gets bigger because your opportunities are bigger and you're able to handle more. And I was confused. I was really confused by it. And I said, "Whoa, what do you mean?" And he smiled and he said, "Well, for example, this month alone, I have to pay $350,000 in bills. That's just my normal monthly expenses for these businesses. Well, whether it's employees or insurance or rent or whatnot." And he was still waiting on vendors to pay for one of his contracts that he had just put out. And he was trying to figure out how he was going to come up with $350,000 by the weekend, and it was going to happen. He was going to find a way to make it happen. And at the time I was worrying about paying a $300 light bill, and I could completely relate to it, only he had a lot more zeros behind it than I did. And that's sort of how the universe works. It'll never give you more than you can handle, whether that's blessings or not. If you can't handle the stress that comes with something very small, there's no way you can handle the stress that comes with something really, really big. I still cringe at the thought of trying to come up with $350,000 for rent in a month. I mean, that's insane. but I can imagine a time in my life when that would be possible. So between now and that time, I've got to develop the skills in order to deal with that kind of stress and in order to deal with that kind of opportunity while still enjoying the process. Alright, so those are my thoughts on dealing with stress as an artist, or just as a person in general. I hope it was helpful. And you can tell from the sketch, the gag of the sketch is this poor little old man's been mistaking the doggy doo-doo box for the mailbox at the local dog park. Poor old guy. I just thought that was a cute idea. I wasn't too happy with this drawing, but what are you going to do? I mostly just wanted to get the idea out of my head, and I might redo it as a digital painting down the road. Anyways, I hope this video was helpful. I'm sorry it was so long. I think it's, 17 minutes, something like that. Just keep in mind, when you've got something that's stressing you out, you don't have to freak out over it. You have a choice over how you deal with the situation. Like, you can choose to not get stressed out. Just stay calm and keep yourself out of overwhelm. And if you do get overwhelmed, just walk away for a little bit, take a breath, remind yourself that in the long run, all that matters is just getting this done with the best you can with the time you have, but turn it in and move on to the next project. Don't overthink things. Anyways, thank you for watching. I hope you got something out of this. Please share and like the video if you enjoyed it. And thank you for watching. Keep smiling.